Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another Fireside chat. So grab your favorite beverage as we chat around the fire. My name is Luke Murray, an Azure MVP from New Zealand, and I am your host today. And with us we have Clayton, a well-architected wizard and content developer. Welcome, Clayton. It's a privilege to have you on the show, and thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about the Azure Well-Architected framework and how it relates to AI workloads and technical writing. Would you mind giving the people that are watching this kind of an introduction on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me, Luke. So as you alluded to, I am a content developer with Microsoft in our Patterns and Practices group, and we focus on three different areas: the Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure, the Azure Architecture Center, and then the Well Architecture Framework. Um, I come from a long kind of engineering side background. I started off, kind of in the traditional IT route of the desktop support, and then systems administrator, engineer, and then I finally made my way up into the architect role. So I was doing solution architecting for a Microsoft partner, and then Microsoft before coming over to the content side. And I've been on the content side for about 3 years now. Um, I know the role itself is really focused on those kind of three main portfolios, but we have hundreds and hundreds of articles within those portfolios. So a lot of it is maintenance, kind of day to day, just managing that all that breadth of content, and then developing new content as well when new opportunities arise. Like AI is a great example. It's just huge opportunity for kind of the world to learn about AI, and it's great to be kind of in a place where we can do that education from a very opinionated perspective.
The I so just for some background as well, I sort of came up in a very similar career path with, system admin, fixing computers, then going into server administration and things like that. And I'm still in the sort of the technical consulting and architecture areas. However, like a shift from architecting solutions and building out capabilities to sort of developing content that others can consume. It's sort of a practical versus, I don't know if you call it a sort of theoretical writing concept. That's an interesting
Yeah,
path to take, but I guess the impact that you have doing the work that you're doing is could be far greater. I'd be interested to dig into sort of why you chose sort of that career direction.
yeah, and it's something I enjoy talking about. I in college I was a classically trained writer. I was in creative writing, and that's kind of the career I had lined up for myself. Is uh, you know teach at some level, and write, creatively write. But I kind of found myself drawn to computers just as kind of a hobby and an interest, and I was able to get kind of a leg into the industry through friends, and at the time, the mid '90s, late '90s, it was kind of a booming enterprise, and I realized quickly that we make a lot more money working in IT than being a college professor or something like that. But yeah, and so I stayed down that path, and it's always been something that is interesting to me and fun. Working on computers and learning about new technology. It's one of my interests, certainly. And then as kind of I started feeling like I'd gone as far as I wanted to go with kind of the engineering side. I really enjoyed the solutions architect role. I did that for years and years because I loved working with customers on like the ideation, the design, building out these huge or even small, environments, and I got into it right when the cloud was becoming more and more popular. So I've been lucky in kind of my timing with my career path, and I started to feel like, all right, well, this has kind of run its course, and what's the next thing? And I started thinking back about, well, I could have a real impact with my writing
Mm.
because I still, am a decent writer, and I know a lot about design, and I know a lot about architecture, and know a lot about kind of a wide swath of technologies, especially Azure, because I was working on that
Yep.
primarily with the partner, and then of course with Microsoft, and um, and it was really kind of an extremely lucky find that I happened upon like a job description for this content development role with the architecture team. So it was
It's the
kind of
best of
just a
both
perfect
worlds.
marriage,
Yeah, yeah.
of like my skills. So
So, like, I myself, I do blog articles. I help out on Microsoft Learn documentation when I can, which is really great that that ecosystem, like, is open up to the community as well because we're the consumers of the content.
right,
So I know definitely when you're writing content, sometimes it could be biased against a certain view, but actually having people read and adjust and being able to help sort of work with the content, especially because like people from like me in the community, we're consuming it, right? So we might see things a bit differently. So I do like the fact that
yeah,
Microsoft sort of open sources that capability to help, but yeah, like I don't do it as a full-time career, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't. So could you, like, what are the common, when we discuss things like technical writing, what are the common sort of pitfalls that you see people, or issues that you see people make quite often?
yeah.
Given,
So um, going back to like like the kind of difference between creative writing and technical writing.
mm,
Um, you know, with creative writing, you want to evoke an emotion, right? You want to evoke a feeling. So the words don't have to be like precise, but they have to be evocative. With technical writing, it's exactly the opposite. It needs to be very precise and it needs to be neutral in terms of tone, right? You can have an opinion and you can describe that opinion and
but it's
give your
more
arguments for or against it.
factual,
But
yeah.
yes, it has to be very precise and very neutral in terms of how you're presenting it. So those are like the things that I always think about is like how can I choose the right words here that convey exactly either the steps that they need to take or like if we're presenting an opinion on why you should do X versus Y, you can't be vague. You can't leave it up to interpretation because that kind of defeats the purpose. And I think um, with like well architected or cloud adoption, those are both um opinionated
Mm,
and they're not like product docs where it's just like you do this by doing this, you do that by doing this kind of thing. It's why would you why would you choose to design this way? What are the types of things that I need to think about when I'm designing or building a team or whatever it may be with my cloud adoption. Um, and so you don't want to leave you don't want to leave any room for kind of vagueness um, or not understanding what the why behind what we're presenting. So
yeah.
that's really like what I spend a lot of time going over when I'm editing my own work or reviewing other people's work is do I have a very clear idea in my head of what this is trying to tell me, and do I have a very clear understanding of why it's trying to tell me that?
I think that's yeah, that's really interesting, and that review period helps a lot. And if I consider like the well architected framework itself, like in IT, we usually have a common phrase of "it depends," right? Because it just really sometimes it really depends. There's a lot of environment variables at play in terms of how stuff is architected and how things are written. But if I consider the concept of, okay, well, we've got some well architected guidance around this solution or this, example reference architecture in the architecture center. There's always the trade-offs, which I think is really good. And that I think before the recording of the meeting kind of touched a bit on some of the adjustments that were recently made, well, maybe a year ago to the Azure well architected framework. And for me, I think some of the trade-offs were really a lot more highlighted around actually why you should make the decision this way or that way. It's a lot more factual than just it depends.
Yeah, yeah. It you're going to have it depends all over the place in these types of content types, but you need to be able to explain what the depends are.
Mm,
What's side A versus side B, and make that very clear what those two things are and why, if you go with side A, you would do things differently than why you do things differently with side B. So yeah, it's very much a concerted and kind of a foundational concern that clarity beyond anything else, right? That clarity is the most important part of this type of technical writing.
Before we go deeper into kind of the well-architected framework and the AI workload um, capabilities, I just want to one more question before while we still on the subject of technical writing is around like an artist is only so good as the tools or the paintbrush that they're using. Like, is there any special tools or processes that you use in writing, or is it just you write, then you go and peer review? Like, is it you do write in VS Code, Word? Is there anything fancy from like a writing perspective that people could use
Yeah.
to?
So
Yeah,
so we use VS Code, and all of our documentation is in Markdown, and that's it's becoming more of a kind of industry standard because it allows you to do collaborative work in GitHub and that kind of thing, which makes all of our lives easier. But that being said, format and repository kind of ideas aside, um, you know, style guides are kind of the utmost important because you want everything in a particular portfolio or doc set to look the same way and to read the same way and to kind of adhere to the same standard. So style guides standards are super important, and then for like our own work, we have like linting tools. Like one of them is called Acrolinks, and it basically goes through a doc after we submit the PR, after we do our merge. It goes through and looks for basically violations of our style guide, and then points them out. And sometimes it offers good suggestions on how to fix it. Sometimes it doesn't, but
yeah.
you get to a point where you know how to fix it. So yeah, having some kind of linter, error checking is super important, um, because there's both kind of concrete things that you don't want to get through, like typos or uh, products that have been renamed, or terms that are no longer kind of considered appropriate. But there's also things like that aren't so concrete, like speaking in an active voice versus a passive voice, or using present tense versus past tense, and so having something that checks that, because as you go through and write, sometimes you're just writing kind of stream of thought, stream of consciousness, and stream of consciousness isn't the same as like a very kind of clear style, right? So so rather than having to like go back and repeat yourself line by line, it's nice to have a tool that kind of catches that, so you can get all the kind of low hanging fruit taken care of like after a couple passes.
Yeah, we talk a lot in like the IT industry, especially around security and architecture and operations around shifting left, right? You want to move the capability before it really becomes a problem, is to the people
Yeah.
that are doing the work, all the tools that are before something's committed or deployed. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about that, but the same principles of sort of shifting left, but more from a writer's perspective and how you
Yeah.
look at it, because it's the same concepts, right? You want to make sure that the tools and the processes you're using are writing correctly. Like for me, I think, yeah, I'm definitely more of a chain of thought kind of writer where I have an idea of what I want to write or blog about, and so I'll start writing it down and I'll go through and I'll take screenshots and I'll sort of create the story, but then I go back because I use Markdown in my blog as well,
Yeah.
which is really good because it just enables that clean kind of context. But then,
Yeah.
like I use a service like Grammarly to go in and kind of adjust the grammar. But yeah, it's always interesting reading some of the Microsoft Learn documentation because like for me in New Zealand, like behavior and like there's certain words that are actually spelled differently in the US than
Right.
they are in
Right.
New Zealand. And then so if I go in and randomly go in and go, oh, that doesn't look right, it's I think there's definitely some standardization across that, which Microsoft has in terms of just okay, it's US English and US like US English US. That's a standard
Yeah.
of the wording.
Right. Right.
So yeah, thank you for that. We'll go more into sort of the well-architected framework sort of discussion now. I mean, this could go on forever. Like we've got the well-architected framework is huge around operational excellence, reliability, cost, and like we discussed, kind of the different trade-offs that you need to make between each of the pillars. So we've been having, like I've been having discussions with clients around the New Zealand North region, which has just gone on today, gone GA today, which is really exciting for us, around sort of why they're wanting to move and the 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 architecture of what their landing zone and their their workloads might look like. But it's always a balancing act between, or you can get a really cost-effective solution, but the impact to the performance or resiliency, like you kind of need to juggle those trade-offs. So
Yeah.
what is your thoughts around kind of the working of the well-architected framework and kind of designing business scope solutions, but using that framework effectively? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah. 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 And when I was in the solution architecting role, both with a partner and at Microsoft, I would often kind of bring the well-architected framework, to the forefront, just to make sure that there's nothing that I was kind of obviously missing when talking about a design or talking about an environment design or a workload design, what have you. Um, and I think that's kind of what's so important about it is we try to be general enough in there that we're covering like a broad swath of industries and environment types, workload types, but we're offering very kind of concrete recommendations on considerations that you need to be thinking about as you go through the life cycle of your workload and environment. So it's a little bit of a balancing act when we go out to the field and build this kind of these guides together. It's like what are you talking to your customers about?
Mhm.
What's important to them? What do we need to ensure that the general population is thinking about. And so we take kind of lots of very discrete and specialized recommendations, and we kind of break them down and work backwards in a way to get to like what's the general theme here, and what's the a recommendation that kind of captures all these discrete and specialized considerations. So that's kind of the well-architected framework from its main um, sections, like the main pillars.
Hmm.
But then we also have workload guidance, and then we'll talk more about this obviously with respect to AI.
Yeah.
But there's Azure Workload Desktop. There's networking. Lots and lots of different workload types that um, that we take those discrete and specialized recommendations and really apply them directly to like this type of workload, and and then it becomes a lot less general and a lot more specialized and a lot closer to the ground.
Yeah, we see a lot of that in the customer or consumer world where, instead of like if we're looking at doing AVD, for example, there's landing zone accelerators, more application specific guidance
Yeah,
around, well, you've got your platform already set, you've got your networking based on these recommendations, and then you've got, yeah, your more Pacific workload one. I just want to go touch back on your comments around the field because, like, you could, you're coming in new, you're browsing the Microsoft Learn documents, you're having a read of the well-architected framework. It's gold stuff. Like it's great, but it's built on a pillar of real-world business problems, right? You've already discussed. You go and talk to the field, you go and talk to businesses. It's not just Microsoft sitting there going, "This sounds all right." It's definitely more industry and actually action orientated.
yeah, yeah. So we are kind of balancing that edge of we are defining the industry standard and we're living up to the industry standard. So in things like AI, especially the well-architected framework, workload is setting the industry standard. But we base that on well-developed standards that we've built with our customers and our competitors have built with their customers and so it's definitely not me and an engineer on my team just hammering out a bunch of things that we think are cool to say.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time with people that are doing real world implementations, and and uh, and it's not just hey what did you do for this customer, let's recommend that. It's very much a kind of circular discussion between all the people that we can find that are doing these implementations, um, and SMEs in very kind of specialized roles that we leaned on to build like kind of the general well-architected framework guidance as well. And so we want to have a variety of voices that kind of come to a consensus about what do we what do we really want to recommend for our customers, and what is you know just because something worked for customer A doesn't mean it's great for customer B through Z, right?
Yeah.
We need to kind of spend a lot of time analyzing within the group on are these real recommendations that can be applied generally, or are they more specific to like a given circumstance?
I think that's a really good lead way into my next question around like the specific guidance. So we've got like AI is a huge big thing. It's been around forever, but now people are building the technology's become a lot more accessible and easier to
Right.
understand. And so, like, you've just released some new guidance around, I think, during the Ignite 2024 frame, so in November sometime, around AI workloads that are part of the well-architected framework as well. You've kind of touched on bits and pieces, but could you sort of discuss, the gaps that you were intending to fill with this and how you realized there
Yeah.
was a need? So, yeah.
Yeah. So, um, it is a very kind of new thing, and even for us and our customers, it's a lot of it is still in POC. there's not a ton of production workloads that are running, but they're actively being built, and Microsoft is kind of hand in hand with those people building those workloads. And so that's kind of the big reason that we're like, okay, we need to kind of jump ahead of the curve here, and make sure that um, make sure that our customers know that we know what we're doing, right? So number one, it's to give them peace of mind that, like, when I bring Microsoft in, they're going to help me build this the right way. And number two, it's if you're not going to be bringing Microsoft in, at least I have somewhere to go where I can be fairly sure that I'm going to build it the right way myself. So so that's kind of the thought process in terms of, like, hey, why do we need this? Why should we get it out there? Because it is very much an unknown for a lot of customers. It's there's so many tools that they can easily grab and start playing with. But should they do that? And if they do that, how can they do it in a safe way? So, like, the things that types of gaps or misconceptions that we wanted to address here. So number one, bringing clarity to what AI is, especially as it relates to a workload. Um, you what are the different types of AI workloads? Um, what are the types of tools that are available to me, and how should I use those tools? Uh, if I wanted to build a chatbot, you know, what are the things I need to think about? If I wanted to build a predictive system, what are the things I need to think about?
So
So really just giving folks that clarity on, like, here's what we think about all the different AI technologies out there. Here's how we would recommend that you approach it. Here's the things you need to think about as you approach it.
so can we? Yeah, that sounds good and it makes sense because it means, like, I think the word clarity is used multiple times throughout this conversation, and I like it because, yeah, a lot of the time I think that's really huge, especially in IT and just about everything, is making sure that people are very clear about what people mean by some of this stuff.
Yeah,
And so if we go into the AI well architected guidance specifically, like the design principles for the workloads, and actually what is an AI workload anyway? Like what
yeah,
is the view from the framework in terms of that detail? Like what is an AI workload, and what are the principles that you design around?
yeah. So I'll start off with a little bit of a higher altitude, because the guidance actually breaks down into several different sections. We have the like the design
Hmm.
principles, and I'll explain what these are as we kind of talk further. But
Yeah.
there's design principles, design methodology, design areas, with cross-cutting concerns. The only one we've got right now is personas, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later, because that's a big
Yeah.
topic. Um, so what is an AI workload? I'll kind of read you the pithy one line that we have, and then I'll kind of unpack it for you.
Cool.
And so, in the context of WAF, an AI workload meets the needs of predictive, discriminatory, or generative tasks. It focuses on ethical functionality, adapting to fast evolving AI technologies, and staying relevant and explainable. So it's a mouthful,
Hmm.
but what does it mean? So the first part is, what does it do? So it can be generative, or discriminative. And a lot of times you'll hear in the industry, or in kind of the internet parlance, traditional AI, but that can be a vague and somewhat misleading term. So we prefer discriminative. And discriminative are things like predictive. They can be model based or not model based. So if you think about, like, characters moving around in a video game, there's no model, but it is a predictive type of AI. And then things like fraud detection, or recommendation systems. Those are all in the discriminative camp.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas generative, that's kind of the new flashy GPTs, generating novel content. So that's where, in terms of WAF, we kind of draw the line and talk about the two different
Yep.
types. And then the next part of that sentence is ethical functionality. So, you know, responsible AI is kind of the most important thing to think about when you're building an AI system, because it's non-deterministic in a lot of ways, right? So we don't know exactly how it's going to output, but we need to make sure that even if we don't even know exactly what it's going to say,
You've got the
what it
safeguards.
does say is safe, right? Yeah. And then the last part of it is adapting to fast evolving AI technologies and staying relevant and explainable. So we want to be able to provide guidance on, what's out there right now and how to kind of adapt to what's coming, even though we don't really know what's coming. But if you got a good solid foundation, you can adapt as you go. And then finally, relevant and explainable. We need to know what is happening with our AI system behind the scenes, and we need to be able to explain it to ourselves and any stakeholders and our customers if we need to. So that's kind of that's what an AI workload is in terms of the context of WAF.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like reading the guidance as well, there's words that I've never come across before, but actually make sense, like things like model decay and things like that
Yeah,
as well. So even though the technology is evolving at a rapid pace, there's guidance around how explainable these workloads need to be, and if it's not as explainable, these are some of the reasons why. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So getting back to kind of the first part of your question about design principles,
Mm,
I'll explain quickly what the design methodology is and design principles and the design
cool.
areas. So design methodology, when you look at that section, it's really kind of overarching themes that we saw come up over and over again as we were talking about different design areas or focus areas as you're designing your AI workload, operating it. Um, and so the methodology kind of distills that in a kind of a bit of a higher altitude, and just gives you kind of a reference point to look back to and say, um, right, I need to be thinking about about this kind of theme, or oh, I forgot about whatever this theme was. So it's kind of like a quick start guide, if you
Yeah.
will. Um, whereas the design principles, so we have the pillars of WAF, and in each of those pillars, we give kind of general recommendations. The design principles look at each of those pillars and pull out discrete recommendations for that technology that build upon the recommendations in WAF. So a reliability recommendation in WAF is, maybe build redundant systems. Well, we take that into AI workload and we say, how are you going to handle um, your inferencing endpoints? So, how are you going to build redundancy in there? Do you need it?
Yeah.
And so we look at each of those kind of functions of your workload, and then go back to the kind of main general WAF recommendations and apply more discrete guidance for each of those, whether it's in reliability, security, cost, performance, OpEx. Um, and then the design areas, that's we basically invert kind of the idea of giving recommendations per pillar, and we take uh, one main focus of what you're going to be building or you have built, and then we apply all of or we apply recommendations and guidance from across the pillars to that one area. And so
Okay.
with this
Yeah.
particular set of guidance, we have design areas for app design, app platform, which is like the underlying technology that you design upon. And so the same for data design, data platform, and then we have ML ops, Gen AI ops, personas, and then responsible AI. So they're all like different areas that you want to focus on to make sure that you're designing a whole and complete system. And then we we kind of look at each of those areas and say, all right, what are the recommendations in the context of WAF from that WAF lens?
Yeah, because it can be quite a complex task, right? Because like AI workloads on its own, they're not just one thing or one resource you deploy. It's a foundation, it's the application, it's the connectivity and the integration. So to me, it makes complete sense to bring that into a comprehensive guidance because it could be chaos otherwise.
It's a lot to think about,
Mm,
but I think the way we organize it from the perspective of design areas makes it a lot more digestible and gives you kind of it's in a way like you can think of it as kind of an exploded design tree. So you know you start at ideation and design and move into implementation and so forth. Um, and the design areas really uh, address all of those phases and all the decision points that you want to be thinking about, but in a kind of narrative style. So you really have lots to kind of digest and think about, especially as we talked about with the trade-offs.
mm.
Because we present the trade-offs throughout each of those design areas. So as you're going through it, you can see right in front of you. Oh, if I'm if I'm preferring security over reliability, what do I need to know that may affect my performance or may affect my reliability? Um, you know, as I make these decisions.
Okay. You touched on a couple of things around, I think the wording was like what you have built or what you are planning to build. I mean, the guidance is just not a point of time of going, we're going to build this thing to do this to solve this business issue. Let's go and take a look at the well-architected guidance, then check yes, we're all happy, we've completed everything, now we build, move on. There's a life cycle component to, and this could be, it's not only the AI workload specific stuff, but it's a well-architected framework in general, right? You've talked about ideation through to running it in production. Like this guidance is getting built on all the time, and so it should be during the entire life cycle of the application or
Yeah,
service, right?
yep, that's exactly right. And we need to be able to meet people where they're at in their journey, wherever it may be, whether they've been in production for 5 years or they're just starting out. There's always room for improvement, and there's always a space for opinionated guidance, and so we need to be able to be encompassing enough that wherever they are, they can have somewhere that they can point to as a source of truth.
So I'm a huge sort of my monitor's about to turn off, so just click the button. I'm a huge sort of I don't know if you call it believer, but I'm a huge personas fan because at the end of the day, it's to me it's kind of the design thinking about going through and architecting and building these solutions, but who are you building them for and what issues that they have. So a common thing that I will do is I'll go through and back to basics and go, well, who are the people we're designing for and what are the problems that they're having? But one of the things that really stood out to me when I started to read through the AI workload documentation was the personas just not being like people, but you're talking about processes as well and other things that in my mind, I may not have thought of as being a persona, but they make sense because AI systems aren't necessarily going to be people building it, but the tasks and the processes are running to do some of this stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, well, what are your thoughts and guidance around what personas, why are they there, and like how would you determine how what personas there might be?
Right. Yeah. So as I mentioned several minutes
Mm,
ago, personas is what we call a cross-cutting concern. So that means for all of the design areas, personas are something that matter in each of those design areas and should be thought about as you kind of work through that design area. Um, and um, and for this particular workload guide, we we kind of strayed from, I guess, the normal definition of personas, which is people doing
yep.
things or people consuming things. And in this light, it's all right. We have all these functions of an AI workload. Um, we have inferencing, we have training, we have hosting, we have data transformation and data handling and presentation. And so there's all these different functions that need to be kind of tied together to make your system work. And in each of those functions, someone or something needs to have access and initiate whatever it is, initiate whatever processes need to be run to fulfill that function. And so in a lot of cases, uh, that can be a process. It can be like a build agent. It can be a task. Um, and so you might have a build agent that has permission to resources Y and Z, and you may have a human that has access to process X. But you need a way to kind of organize all of those ideas, and the way that we talk about it is, all right, you have a table, or you can use cards like a PowerPoints, but you need something to kind of identify what the persona is,
Mm,
what it has access to, what it does, and kind of who owns it in terms of roles. So a data scientist um, may be a persona, but it also may be the owner of a persona that's not a human. And so it's a way of organizing your workload in terms of what skills do I need from the humans I have, what processes do I need to run, and what functions are they performing. And so it does a few different benefits. Number one, it helps you identify all of the roles that are going to be involved in your workload and fill any gaps. Like if you see that, oh, I don't have someone with the skill set that I'm going to need to perform this function, then you at least know about it and you can work on filling that gap. um, and it provides you a way of having kind of a clear list of like who has this permission, who has that permission. Um, you know, so if there's ever any questions about like um, things going wrong with access or permissions, at least you have a paper trail. um, and the other thing that it's really helpful for is just really kind of organizing, um, mapping out functions to roles. So if there's a specific role that you don't have in your pool, um, can it be like, can that role be owned by a different person, or do you need to fill that specifically? So that's kind of the way we talk about
yeah,
it.
and it feeds back into the explainability as well of being able to have a ethical system that you can explain on what and personas are a way of helping you do that. So.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Mm, yeah, really, really great. Thank you. Just wary of
Hmm.
time, but yeah, just to finish it off, do you have any additional guidance or information that you want to share with the people listening? I mean, it could be either technical writing, well-architected cloud adoption, anything you kind of want to leave or.
Yeah. So, you had kind of brought up as part of your life, you contribute, and like I said, these are, publicly, they're publicly available, and anybody can contribute. You can leave feedback. It's always very much appreciated. The feedback that we get on our documentation, because we're only as good as the people we work with and ourselves. So there's lots and lots of different perspectives out there in the world. Whether it makes it into our documentation or not, I can't guarantee anything, but it's certainly super useful to get different perspectives and the feedback and point out any gaps that we may have, um, or different ways of looking at a given scenario or problem. So number one, we definitely appreciate all the feedback, and our contributors. We're blessed to have a super um, robust contributor world out
Hmm.
there that's helping us out. And then technical writing, um, I think if I was gonna give myself, some guidance from before I came here, the you know you're gonna deal with writer's block like any other writing profession, but you know relying on existing content out there to give you kind of a jump start and to help you get started is always super helpful. That's what I've found is if I'm really kind of struggling with how I want to phrase things or even just get started, if I go to find an article that may be along the same lines but with a different product, or from a different perspective, like
Yeah.
cloud architect framework, the CAF has a different altitude than the WAF. One's a lot more focused on organizations versus workloads. But even if you look at an article in CAF, for example, that talks about some of the kind of the same ideas that you're going to be talking about in your article, it gives you that kind of jump start to start getting ideas on the page. So that's one thing that I've kind of found myself using as a kind of a nice tool to get myself out of these kind of ruts where you have writer's block.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty helpful. I know for myself, I've got years of stuff in OneNote and things like that. That's just like, oh, this was done in a specific sentence, or oh no, I like the way that this was specifically laid out in an image. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting to hear that because yeah, writer's block, yeah, it is a real thing, but being able to kind of drive from sort of the community and what other people have done to get started, yeah, is great.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm not even writing stuff for like products that haven't been released yet, where you're in your career, you'd be writing products that I haven't even heard of yet. So yeah, it's quite good.
yeah. It's definitely like a daily challenge, especially with things like the AR workload, where we're creating a whole cloth. It's net new, but like I said earlier, it's built on kind of well-established ideas, and so you always have to remind yourself that this isn't just completely out of the blue, and I don't have to kind of invent the wheel here. The wheel's already invented. It's just what are we putting on top of it?
Yeah. I like that. Well, thanks again, Clayton, for coming and sharing your knowledge about technical writing, well-architected frameworks. Like this conversation could go on for forever. So I just appreciate you coming and talking to us about all the amazing work that you've been doing to help us get up to speed with, all these solutions. So thank you very much for coming and having a chat today.
It was really my pleasure, Luke, and thanks for inviting me.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, have a good day.